these are generally the questions I get in the course of my work. So for that, you need to understand, and this is what I've started explaining to parents too. You need to understand there are three different components here. There is communication, there is language, and then there's speech. And you've got to understand what these three are before you look at why your child is not doing a certain thing. So let's look at what these are. So when you say communication, that's the exchange of ideas and thoughts and opinions. And it could be verbal, it could be written, it could be typed. And it also includes all your nonverbal expressions, your gestures, your facial expressions, your body language. That's communication, which is what you want your child to do, communicate, right? What is language? Language are those set of symbols you use to communicate. It could be words, it could be pictures, it could be gestures, or it could be signs. That is the medium you use for communication, the set of symbols you use. And what is speech then? Speech is purely a motor act that brings this language and communication forward, right? Speech and challenges to speech could involve difficulties in articulating certain sounds or pronouncing certain sounds or words. It could be, where you're not able to coordinate your vocal folds so that you can make a sound. It could be the rhythm of speech. That is all what comes under speech. So it is a motor function, right? So when you say, why is my child not talking? It's not because of the communication and language which is always affected. It could be purely in terms of a motor act that's affected. Now, so if you can look at it in the brain, let's take communication as the intent. The intent to communicate has to develop. If the intent develops, then the messages will go through the language parts of the brain, and you will start trying to figure out what do you want to say, right? The ideation starts coming in, the words start getting pulled out, and then you start putting them into a sequence so that it's grammatically correct and it can be understood, whether it's the same language or you're changing language. All of that happens in the language centers of the brain. And then finally, the brain sends signals to plan the movements in a coordinated way, in a sequenced way, so that you can express that, whatever you've thought of, right? So if you look at it, language and communication are 100% cognitive, whereas speech is 100% motor. So it is the motor part of the brain, the part of the brain that controls the motor functions, that is affected. And mostly since I'm going to be limiting my talk to children with autism, we see about 68% of children with autism having motor planning disorders or motor planning difficulties. So there is a large percentage of children who get affected by motor acts, all right? So what happens, just because a child doesn't have speech, it does not mean they don't have language. And that's one thing that you need to kind of separate. What happens, we look at speech as the only way to prove that a child knows something. And as a speech therapist, I'm here to tell you that is not the only way. There is a whole lot more that can be done to develop that language and communication, which is not speech-based. Because if a child has speech difficulty and you're telling them, talk, tell me this, only then I give it to you, it's equivalent to telling a child who cannot even sit up to start running. That's the equation. So you wouldn't do that to a child who's not even able to sit up, to say, no, next day start running. No, you have to run, only then I'll give you this. It doesn't work that way. So what happens? The child will get frustrated, will shut down, will just refuse. They start hating this concept of speech. Right? So it is very important as a parent and a professional to know the difference. That does not mean we give up on speech either. Speech is definitely something we want to develop. If the child is capable of it, of course we want to develop it. But you've got to understand why it is taking time. I have kids who are on 6-month programs with me, 1-year programs with me, and although they show improvement, sometimes it's slow, sometimes the child takes time to get to that word level, to get to that phrase level. So it kind of depends on the severity of the motor planning issues they have. So you've got to give them time, but that doesn't mean we don't do anything actively about it. But your expectation should be also very realistic so that you can build these plans. All right. So let's look at some research, because I don't want it to be that I said this. It is just research that's out there that you can find too. So research that's been done has said for children with autism, you do see impairments in vestibular control, gross and fine motor movements, oculomotor functions in terms of purposeful eye movement, as well as praxis, which is your thinking about what to do, then planning it and executing different motor movements. And what is speech? Speech is the same thing. If I need to say something, I first need to think about what I need to say, plan that movement, and then execute that movement. Right? So it is being shown that children with autism have these issues. There are also studies that show that the motor cortex, which is in your brain, the one that controls the motor part of your body, controls all the movements. It controls something called mirror neurons. And that they have found is involved with imitation, language, theory of mind, and empathy. And these are some of the things that you are seeing are deficits in children with autism, and which cause more social and communicative deficits, right? So the reason I have this green box in front is so that instead of reading that entire very technical phrases from the study, I just made it simpler, just so that you're able to understand it better. So this research that said that, again, you have your cerebellum, you have your motor cortex. Now, if there is issues with the cerebellum, you have difficulty in making motor movements automatic. And if there is less connection between the two, right, when the neuronal connections are poor, again, the automaticity in movement gets affected. And when these movements get affected, it affects the development of gestures, which are also important, a stepping stone to develop socialization and communication. All right. Now, why do you want automaticity in movement? Speech is very automatic. You don't have to think, okay, how am I going to say 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 again to say mama, for example. You don't think so much. You do it so fast. Why? Why am I able to say so much in one breath? Because those neuronal connections are so strong that you are able to pick up on the sounds. You plan it so fast. You're able to, you get the ideation fast, you get the planning fast, and then you're able to execute it really fast. That, what happens is you practice, 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 and those movements become really automatic. So you want these movements to become automatic, because the more automatic the movements become, the faster you see them. The more time it takes, you see that delay even so in the behavior that you see from the child, whether it's speech, whether it's picking up something, anything, you see that delay, right? So you want the movements to start getting automatic, where they don't have to think so much about it. What is automaticity for you? Opening the door, you don't even have to think about it. Walking, that is automatic. You don't think about which leg you're putting forward, you just walk. Running, all of this, because you practiced it so much since you were a baby, that now it is so automatic, you don't even think about it. You know, I don't know what it is. I know what I have to do. Right? So those are the motor plans that are there already and that have become so strong that it's become so automatic. And that's the same thing we want for speech. It's not about whether the child can just say and then stop there. No, it's about how you can take that and make it a meaningful word, and from word to make a phrase and sentence and so forth. All right. So let's look.
I'm just gonna stop you here. I think your voice
again.
Yeah, fluctuating again. It was perfect like a minute ago, just before.
All right. Is it still okay now, or is
Yeah,
it gone again?
I think when you're closer to your laptop.
Is it better? Do I get this close? Is it fine?
Yeah. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. I won't move. I'll try and stick to this position then.
Mhm.
Okay. You'll see me really up close and personal, so excuse that. So let's look at what's happening inside our brain, all right? So the areas we're going to be talking about is this, what I highlighted, the motor cortex. And the motor cortex consists of a few areas. Again, don't worry, I'm just explaining this just for you to understand, but it's not that you have to by heart it or anything of the sort. But I want you to understand what's happening inside the brain and why the difficulty is shown. So you have your motor cortex, which consists of these four areas. You have the premotor cortex, the supplementary motor cortex. You have the primary cortex, right? And, oh, it turned, okay, never mind. So let's look at the motor cortex and what these parts do. So when you have a child and you tell the child, say Baba, all right? And you are asking the child to imitate you. So what happens is, first, there is a visual command, the information that goes that you have to make into a motor command. And this is where this area, the posterior parietal cortex, is where this information comes in and it's converted into a motor command, right? As in, I have to say Baba. All right, now what does the rest of my brain have to do? The motor part of the brain, the next thing that happens is the premotor cortex will say, okay, I have to say Baba. Now what's the plan for that? What's the motor plan? What do I need to pick? Which sound is it? Per, is it ma, is it ah? What is it that I have to pick? Okay, Baba, ba, I have to pick ba. What's the motor plan for ba? What's the motor plan for ah? So this is the part of the brain that starts picking up the plans that are needed to say a particular word. And then it goes to this part of the brain where it starts planning the movements. Okay, to say, Baba, what do I need to do? I need to close my lips. I need to open my mouth again. I got to close my lips. I have to bring sound out, and etc. So on and so forth. There's a complex sequence of movements that's built here at this part of the brain. And then finally, there is the execution part, which is what the primary motor cortex is for. So you can see there is a connection between one side to the other and so on and so forth. That there is, you have to connect the dots for that movement that we make so easily to happen. Now, the another part of the brain that's equally important is the cerebellum, which I said is little down here, a little thing that you can see that I've highlighted. Now the cerebellum, just give me a second. Okay. The cerebellum is very important for speech because it works on the timing, the coordination, and the sequencing. Now, if the child said, ba, ba, well, that's not exactly how you would say. So the timing has gone wrong, right? It's not really helpful if the child is going to be saying it that way. Now you need to be able to coordinate those two movements too. I just can't say ba ta ba 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 ma ba da ba 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 ba, all of this. I have to coordinate the movement. I don't have ba ba either. I have to coordinate the movement, and then I need to know how to sequence it. I cannot say ba 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 ba. I cannot say ba pa. I got to say ba pa ma ma. I don't say anything else. I have to sequence it such a way that it's the word that I have to say. So it is a really important part that is also involved in the motor act of speech. As you can see, you see how much movement there is inside the brain, how much connection there needs to be for the simple act of saying a word. And this has to happen like this. So if some of you or most of you attended Dr. Aditi's presentation a few days ago, she had talked about the neuronal connections and autism being a disconnect because of these neuronal connections that get disconnected, and that's what happens in autism. So as you can see here, there are a lot of connections that need to be made, and what happens is these connections, if any of these connections get disconnected, all of these connections get disconnected, your speech output is automatically going to get affected, or your motor movements in general are going to get affected, right? So what do we want the brain to do? If you're looking at speech, what do we want the brain to do? You want the left and the right hemispheres to talk to each other. There is a little band here called the corpus callosum, just reminding you of your science classes or biology classes long ago. There is this little thin band, and that's what helps the two brains to connect. Now, why do we want them to connect? Because the left side of the brain controls the right part, and the right side of the brain controls the left side, right? And when you look at speech, we don't talk like this. Speech is very symmetric. That means what? You need both sides to work equally so that you get a symmetric movement and you get clarity. So I need both sides of my brain to talk to each other and tell me what movement to make. All right. We want to strengthen these neuronal connections. As you saw, there were so many connections there which for just the motor act of it. I'm not even talking about the language. I'm not talking about picking up the word. This is just for the motor act. You could see so many connections that were needed. So we need to be able to select that motor plan fast. We need to be able to plan that motor act fast. We need to be able to execute it fast, right? And we need to also improve the timing, coordination, and sequencing accordingly. Excuse me. And then we need to create more automatic movements. So we want to practice all of this so much that we're able to create these automatic movements, because again, speech needs automaticity for it to be fast and for it to be effective and for it to be clear. Okay. So how is it all connected to speech? Why is it, as a speech therapist, I'm going into the brain and I'm talking about motor movements per se? Why? Because like I said, speech is purely a motor act, right? Speech needs that imitation capability where you're looking at something, looking at someone, if they tell you something, to be able to imitate it, right? Speech needs awareness of the oral structures and an idea of what to do in terms of planning the movement, right? Speech needs control and symmetric movements. I can't just say, that makes no sense. I would need that control to be able to say, I want to go, and be able to do that fast such that clarity is not affected, right? I would need to have timed and coordinated movements, and speech also needs a sequence of movements. It's if a child is saying saying ba, saying ka, say whatever, he's making a variety of sounds, but he's not able to put it into small combinations, right? And that's the planning that I see a lot of times. We get to a stage where we get sounds. After a long time, we get sounds. But then from the sounds, then the child has difficulty moving to sequencing. And that's really important, because all words are sequenced. They're a sequence of movements. To be able to say any word, for example, if I have to say bubbles, it's a sequence of movement which goes from bird to bird to to it's a sequence of movements that I need to create, right? So that's why you need to understand the motor part of it, to know where does my child have difficulty. Now, what can I do to strengthen it and create better neuronal connections, right? So when we start, I used to start at the fine motor area here. This is where I used to start. Not really thought about this. And I used to leave it to the OTs because this is what the OTs generally work on. But then I have a lovely team that I work with, and I've learned a lot from them. And I've seen them work with the kids, and after I attended autism movement therapy course also, I realized being a speech therapist, I cannot just limit myself to just one area, because it just does not make sense. I have to be able to connect and help the child connect the dots so that I can get to what I want, which is speech. So we are looking at gross motor development to fine motor development, where in each space that we go to, in each level that we go to, we're looking at control, coordination, and sequencing ability everywhere, and getting good control, coordination, and sequencing. So what's the importance of gross motor development? As a lot of you would already know, but I'm just highlighting it because I want you to connect the dots, hence I'm highlighting it. It helps the child develop body awareness, reaction speed, agility, coordination, strength, all of it. You need all of this, right? Not only just for a healthy lifestyle, but the child gains most confidence in his body or her body. And that's really important to know that where my body is in this space. What do I need to do to pick up that glass? What do I need to do to be able to say this word? Right? If I cannot pick up the glass or I find difficulty in planning that movement, I know that it's going to be difficult here too. So I need to look at where they are with the awareness of their body. And also, as you can see, it helps a child to do more complex skills in future activities. And as a speech therapist, what's the complex skill I need? Speech, really complex. It is one of those finest motor skills that are required because it is, you need the tongue to move in a very controlled way, you need the jaws to move, you need the lips to move in a very controlled, coordinated way so that clarity doesn't get affected. And a lot of times parents tell me, no, my child is able to talk, but I cannot understand what he says. And that's the coordination and the sequencing and the control you need to be able to get to that. So for that, the body as a whole also needs to pick up on that. All right. So what are options that parents have, or what should we look at in terms of if you're part of a team to know that, okay, this child really has motor planning issues. What can I do to help him? These are just some of the things I've put together. You are free to add to it. But just to give you an idea, sensory integration, of course, always important. Not stimulation, sensory integration. All right. Gross motor activities that are targeting motor planning, crossing midline, those kind of activities. Yoga is fantastic. It's so natural and it's so part of our culture. We should all explore it, right? Music and movement. I'm sure most of you have already heard from Joanne Lara about AMT. You heard from Dr. Aditi about DMT. These are all fantastic music and movement structured programs that are very, very useful. Daily routines. The child does every day. I'm brushing, I'm bathing, I'm dressing. All of these are routines. Again, what does it involve? Control, coordination, sequencing. So the more you're developing that, so why do the OTs ask you to develop that? Because again, it helps this whole process, right? Your fine motor activities, of course, working towards oral motor movements that are targeting speech. Again, here, targeting speech movements, and I keep saying this, if you do oral motor activities for the sake of doing oral motor activities, you're not going to get speech movements. All right. If you are looking at speech movements, you've got to do activities that will help develop speech movements. So I've said this many times. Initially, when I used to ask, why do you do blowing? And I used to get the answer, oh, my therapist asked me to do it. Or my therapist will say, oh, because it's a vegetative skill. So, we need it. It's not that. That's not the reason you're doing a blowing activity. You're doing a blowing activity because, one, you're teaching the child how to bring air out on command. You're teaching the child how to round his lips. You're teaching the child to pull his tongue back. You're teaching the child how to keep the jaw at a certain height. So it's not, but it's when you do all of that and you've got a movement, what is the speech movement that you can get? One is ooh, because that's the shape that you're making. The other one is to be able to understand blowing gets me the per sound, right? Or the burr sound. And if the child knows how to blow on command, it also helps with sounds like etc. So if you're doing something which is oromotor based, make sure that you're not doing it because it's an exercise that you were taught, but because it's targeting something specific for speech. All right. And I've put one more thing here, AAC. And you might wonder why I've put that here. AAC, if some of you don't know, is alternative and augmentative communication. That means anything other than speech. Now, why have I put this here as an option? If you have a child who's got severe motor planning issues or dyspraxia or any of these difficulties, and they're not able to say the word you want them to say, how long would you stay at that before the child gets frustrated. You are putting a child in a situation where you're saying, talk, no, talk, no, talk. And the child is just not able to do that. He's not able to communicate. He's not able to, say what he wants to say, what's in his mind. What's going to build frustration? What's going to build aggression? What's going to build, I hate speech, right? Only this is going to build the child, because I have many a times when a child comes to me like at the age of 7 or 8, where they've gone through speech therapy traditionally, where they have gone through the traditional approaches, and they hate speech therapists. They were like, you're a speech therapist, I'm running from here. If I say, can you try this? And they're like, I don't want to do this, because for them, speech equals frustration, speech equals hate. So before you get to that stage, I know as a parent, I know as a teacher, I know when you are working with kids, whatever profession you are in, you want the child to be able to talk. Definitely, I know that, and as a speech therapist, I want it too. But it's going back to my simile earlier, it was like you're asking a child to run when he cannot even sit up. Would you keep asking the child to run? And in the end, the child would probably give up. Or would you help the child first get the strength to stand up, take a few steps independently, then walk faster, and then get into running? That's what you need to simultaneously help your child to do with respect to speech too. I'm not saying we're giving up on speech. I'm saying you need to give them an alternative way to use, to communicate, so that their frustration reduces and they're able to move forward. If you're only going to look at speech, let me tell you, you are going to frustrate your child and you are not going to get anywhere. I have so many children who hate the sight of me because it's like, auntie comes, auntie tells me, auntie says, oh, auntie, and then it's like, oh, I don't like this auntie anymore, right? So, and then parents also become, I don't want to interact with my dad and mom. I don't want to do this. So it just becomes the whole bond goes off because we're only expecting that one thing, which is speech. So I would really recommend all of you who work with children or have children with motor planning difficulties to please look at an alternative mode of communication. It could be low tech, it could be high tech, using a device, because communication and language is a lot more important. And speech is a byproduct of good communication. All right. And it is a myth that using AAC will hinder speech development. It will not happen. There is research galore. You can look it up on Google too. There is enough research that they have done that says using AAC actually helps speech to develop rather than stops it. So if you have other people telling you, no, don't use AAC because it might not motivate them to speak, please let me tell you that you're wrong. All right, or that person was wrong. You need to be able to give them an alternative mode. And when you look at it, if you're using an alternative mode, what are you encouraging? Again, motor movements, fine motor movement. The more fine motor movements you have, the better it gets here too. All right, so these are some of the options. And what do all of them do? They all start helping develop patterns in the brain that again are needed for controlled, coordinated and sequence motor patterns for speech. All of these are helping for speech. So do you want this to happen? Yes. Do you want speech? Yes. And you make sure that all of this is happening too, right? All of these gross motor movements to fine motor movements are happening. And please give them an alternative mode of communication so that they're able to participate in these oromotor activities with you. They can tell you then where it's difficult, what they're facing. You don't know when you're doing the exercises with them. You just assume they will like, oh, just do it, just do it. So if you start with some alternative mode of communication, just imagine if the child can participate along with you. Isn't that the best? Where they can tell you where they're having difficulty. Just imagine that, right? That's beautiful if the child is able to communicate that with you. But when we don't give them that alternative mode, it's not going to happen, right? So these are just some activities which, just giving you a baseline example of cross-motor activities, crossing midline activities, yoga, sequencing activities, everyday activities. As you can see, this little girl sweeping here, all of which are developing these movements again and again, right? And why do we add music a lot of times I have, I mean, we've heard that music helps. We've seen that children with autism love it most of the time. Most of the kids love music. And you've seen that some of the children pick up the sounds and the words from the songs, but they're not able to use any of these words in everyday life. So why is it that they pick up speech? Why do they pick up words when it comes to music? Why is it they cannot pick it up when we ask them to say it? All right. So music is something really powerful because it virtually wakes up the whole brain. It gets the whole brain involved. And do we want that? Yes, you saw the kind of connections that were needed for just a motor act. Now, if you're looking at cognition and language being added in there, there is a whole lot of connection that needs to be made. So that's what music helps with. So you have have music connecting different parts of the brain together. All right, from the right to the left and the left to the right, and in the right side itself going back and forth and so on and so forth. And there's also research that was just done, I think in 2011, that said that music and language, certain parts of language and certain parts of, I mean, the rules of language and music are processed in the same brain system. So memory, why we are able to pick up on a tune, why we're able to pick up on a word, that same center in the brain is where language, the memorization of language also happens. And the same way, the rules of music in terms of what is the beats, what is the tune like, you know, which sound you put here, which word you put there, that's also in the same brain system as language, where we have to understand the rules of language. If I want to say I want to go to the park, I don't say park, go, want, I. You don't say it that way. So there are rules to language and how you form the words to say something meaningful. So this, if you start using music, you are strengthening those brain systems, so that that will also help the language systems to get better. And of course, the best part of music is it calms us, it regulates us. Of course, when you're working with your children, especially when it comes to speech, do you want the child to be regulated? Yes. Do you want the child to be calm? Yes. Because if they're calm and regulated, they are able to connect the dots. If they are not calm and regulated and they're screaming the entire time or crying the entire time and just saying, I want to get out of here, do you think anything is going to connect? No, none of it is going to connect. So it is useful always to add music. You can also have music, playing instrumental music, playing softly in the background for children who find it difficult to cope with the day. So these are different ways you can use music. And I'm not going into detail because I think these webinars were done earlier. So, you know, what does this movement therapies, dance and autism movement therapy look at? Sensory integration, because you're connecting to the two hemispheres. A lot of patterning, processing, sequencing, rhythms, because you're looking at the whole brain getting connected, not just the motor component or just the language part. It's the whole brain that needs to work together so that those neuronal connections get better, so that we get the output we want. And when you do that, you give children the ability to develop their emotions better, their cognition, their academics, their speech skills, all of it. Right? I'm a firm believer in it now because I've seen the differences it makes with and without adding this component in. For a long time, I did not, because I did not know about it. In Jan, when I did my AMT course, that is when I started putting it together a little better, and I'm seeing so much of change with the children I work with. If I'm working with OPT, I make sure I do some more activities before that to get to OPT and get to speech, right? So there's a lot of talking I've done now. What I'd like to do is show you a few videos of parents. This is a parent who was, I'm grateful because she allowed me to show this video to you, just so that you could understand, right? And she's doing a little bit of, it's a little bit of AMT, more music and movement that she's doing with her child. And the things that you need to remember about when you're doing any kind of music and movement is you need to reduce their confusion. So you need to let them know where's the starting point, where's the end point. I start here, I stop here, and then I go back there and I come back here. So you want to make it very predictable. The more predictable it is, the faster the brain picks it up. The faster the brain picks it up, the more automatic it becomes. All right? If you keep changing the steps, so you have some rhymes that go like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and it's so fast paced. And some of the kids are not able to keep that pace because they're not able to process those movements so fast, right? So we're looking at pacing the movements so that the child is able to pick up and achieve. If the child can achieve it, the child will want to do it the next time. If the child finds it too difficult, do you think he's going to sit with you the next time? No, he's going to run away, right? And again, the video I'm going to show you is you do have the sibling talking in the background, so she's also very excited seeing her brother do this. But what I'd like you to notice is the mother talking? Is the mother giving instructions? Is the mother getting agitated? These are the things I'd like you to notice. Is she working on upper body imitation? Is she working on whole body imitation? Is she working on just the lower body imitation, right? All of these are part and parcel of developing this. Is the child calm? Is the child regulated? What's happening? Is he getting frustrated? Is he getting aggressive? I would, like you to observe all of this, right? I'll tell you a few things after you watch the video. The volume is low, but I'd like you to concentrate on what she's doing. She's not talking, so you don't have to worry about if you're missing anything. They're looking at a mirror here. That's why he's not facing her. So as you could see, I want you to notice how did the mother, because most times when I say let's do music and movement and the parent does it at home, or others are doing it with him, there is so much of instruction that comes in. Now you have to remember working on motor imitation, limited to motor imitation, rather than putting language in there, because then that's one more thing the child has to process, understand, and do. Now, children with motor planning difficulties who have got good language, they follow the language and not the motor movement. So you want them to be able to make the movement by looking at the person, not always putting language to it. And you saw that the mom is working on all of this in terms of upper body, lower body, whole body. She's not saying anything to him. She's just working on look at me and do what I do, right? And if you look at speech, when you work on imitation, what is it you get them to do? Look at me, say what I'm saying. Look at me, do what I do. Now, if it's difficult in this gross motor area, it's going to be difficult in this fine motor area, right? So this is just a way to start building on it, but you have to understand, not with the instructions, not with putting language in there, right? And let me tell you, this started a couple of months ago. At that point of time, he was running all over the place. He did not want to come and walk up and down. He did not want to do any of this, but it's beautiful to see how far he's come and how regulated he is and how observant he is. He's attending to the mom. He's looking at what the mom is doing through the mirror, and he's following, and mom gives him time to process. And when he finds it difficult, there is a little bit of a physical cue, like a tap on the leg, to get him to understand that's where you need to start making the movement. All right. So that's just an example that you could do. Again, very slow pace, not fast paced at all, so that child is able. So instrumental music always works better than when you take rhymes which are fast paced. Now, this is another one that can go into drumming. There are a lot of people doing drumming nowadays, and this is just, again, one activity you could try. You could do it one-on-one with the child, or you could do it in a group with the child. You will see a bit of both, of the same mom who's doing this with her child. Again, initially, I will just tell you, when she started with the drumming activity, the child really did not know what needed to be done. There was no coordination. If the mom was using both hands, he would just use one hand. If the mom was using right hand, whatever hand came to him. There was no coordination to it. He didn't like it. He'd get frustrated. He was dysregulated. So a lot of things that are happening in the background. So this is, again, after weeks and months of practice that she's able to get to this.
Shireen, for some reason the video is skipping frames.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Again, internet connection. I'm not sure. Would you like me to show it again, or?
You can show it again and sort of describe the process, I guess.
Okay. Talking during that process. Okay, let me try. So you have the child and the mom doing this regulation activity. Mom's using numbers, because again, that's a way to expose the child to numbers and rote counting, but also gives them predictability on what can be done. Oops, sorry. I don't know what happened there. All right. And the other part of the video is when she's doing it with the sibling, where he has to take turns drumming. So again, in between, he did try to just see if the child is observant, he'll know when it is his turn and will wait for that. And if he's not observant, he will just tap, because he just knows he has to tap. So that's where the teamwork comes in, where the child understands, okay, when is it my turn? When do I need to do this? Again, this is a very simple drumming activity. Now we are working on trying to get that rhythm up, because rhythm and speech closely connected, because it involves a lot of timing and coordination sequencing. So now we're trying to see if we can add a few more components there, where it's not just numbers and alphabets, because it gets boring after a point of time to do the same thing again and again. But to look at, say, a rhythm where I'm going to do it on my hand, but I would be doing it on a drum or a table, where we go and things of the sort, or right, left, da, 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 something along those lines, where the child starts coordinating both sides of the brain to be able to create these complex movements. Again, because this is a complex movement, so we want a lot more motor plans like that, right? Again, and generally they don't find this as stressful as speech. So if you can take it from A to B to C to D and finally get to speech, they would be a lot more willing to do it, right? And there's another one, which is clapping games. We all played it when we were younger, clapping games, and they're also quite useful to build some motor planning, sequencing, coordination, because as you can see, it helps in a lot of things. Cognitive, listening, rhythm, coordination, crossing midline, brain development, social, so many things that a simple clapping game can help in, right? And I'm going to just show you again 2 examples. Hopefully you're able to see the video of the 2 examples. So these are some of the clapping games. There are a whole lot. If you just look it up on YouTube, you'll get a whole lot of clapping games. I just picked a few. Pat a cake, Miss Mary Mac, double double. You can use numbers when you do it. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you want, or you can use animals, common objects at home. But then again, if the child is completely nonverbal, is not able to do that, I wouldn't probably start there with the animals and common objects. I would maybe try and create some motor plans. So in this particular one, I've just taken one example, which is Miss Mary Mac. I'm just showing you how you can make it simple to complex, because you want, speech is a very complex series of movements. So if you want that complex series of movements, the brain has to understand how to do that. So this is one way of doing it, where you are taking it from simple to make adding a movement, then adding something to it, then adding more to it, and building on it so that it becomes more complex. So you can just see Miss Mary Mac goes like this way, go Miss Mary Mac. And then so there is a whole lot of movements there. So we are looking at maybe taking it really simple and then making it complex. So step 1 is just about getting them to understand clap. That's getting to midline. One hand, just hit it. Again, clap. Other hand. Sometimes they might cross, sometimes not. Again, please remember, no instructions are being given. To step 2, where we're taking it one step forward. Bilateral coordination needed now. Now we're crossing midline. A lot of children with autism find difficulty crossing midline. They can do straight, but they find it difficult to cross the midline. So now, if those movements are there, we're going to make it faster, because we want speed, we want agility, we want better reaction speed. Again, taking it faster. And then adding a few components in the end. just an example of step by step how you can make those motor movements more and more complex. And here we have another one, which is double double. Right, so these are just some clapping games, and if you I have used them with children. I have taken it one step at a time, as you saw in with Miss Mary Mac, and I have been able to move them to more complex movements bit by bit. And again, it's a fun activity. It's, if it's fun, the child wants to sit with you and do it. If you make it work, yes, they're going to hate it. So the more you can make it fun, the faster those motor movements develop and become automatic. This is another tapping game which you can use. This is from BOMED. So it's a visual perception activity at the same time, because you have to see what colors we're tapping. You don't have to make it so complex. So this is from some people in Turkey who did it, and I was had the opportunity to go and attend one of their courses. They have a lot of movement-based activities that they do with preschool children, and again, they're up on YouTube. You should check them out to get more ideas too. Some of the movements are a little complex, but again, that's up to you as a parent or a professional to simplify it, but start getting some movement going. So this actually combines a whole lot of skills there in terms of visual perception, as well as fine motor coordination, as well as biological. You name it, a lot of it is there. Attention, all of it is there. So it's a lovely activity for you to explore if you'd like to do it. Now, when you do all of this step by step, you want to finally get to what? Oral movements. You want to be able to create, because what are we working towards as a speech therapist? I'm working towards speech. So if I want to work towards speech, I need to slowly get those movements finer and finer and finer so that I can get towards speech. All right. So here we have some tools that we use in OPT, or oral placement therapy, to start the process of getting motor movements that are needed for speech. So again, just an example, some of you might have seen this video already, of how movements can be created, like an R and an E, etc., for speech. All right. And then finally, from automotor movements, we want to look at speech. Again, most of you would have seen this video. This is my hero, so I will keep showing his video all the time. This is how we move to speech. Mom is giving him tactile cues to go from to say. You might not be able to hear it, but that's what he's saying. that's how you take the sequencing all the way to speech. All right. So in a nutshell, this is what you can do for, especially for those children who have severe motor planning issues and who are getting stuck. You start with gross motor imitation, you go into motor imitation with objects, you go into more fine motor imitation, um, and one of them that I love to play, Simon Says. I just discovered that how fun Simon Says can be. But Simon Says without the verbal command. So it'd be Simon says, that's a fine motor imitation. Simon says, things of the sort. So if you can play, again, play, not that only the child plays, but the parent and professional, you play together, right? That's when it's useful. And try to keep language out of it. If you're working on motor imitation, keep language out of it, because you're trying to create motor patterns. You're trying to create those motor plans. So if you bring language in there, that there's more processing, and then it becomes language based only and not really motor based. And why do you want motor based activities? Because speech is motor. All right, that's why, because that is why we're trying to build the motor imitation alone without bringing language in. And then you look at head and oromotor imitation, which could be blowing OPT activities. Again, Simon Says you can do here. And then finally, speech imitation with tactile cues and gradually without, where the child is able to sequence sounds. As you saw in the video, it went from sound, it went to combination of sounds, then it went to a word. And that's how the sequencing has to happen. And once they're able to pick up on words, then is this language coming in there to make that word more meaningful, practical, every day, so that it's used again and again and again, so that that motor plan stays, that pattern becomes automatic, and the child is able to say it spontaneously. So that is what can help bit by bit to work towards speech imitation. And that's all I have for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shereen. And we have a lot of questions for you, and we'll
Oh gosh, okay.
we'll be able to take a few. So I'm attaching the links to Play Street India and their website so that you can get in touch with Shereen and her team and address all the questions that you have for her, which are not addressed here today. They also do a lot of workshops that you might be interested in taking. So before we begin the question answer session, I just want to share the e-certificate links with everyone. Please fill out this link and you will get the e-certificate of attendance for this webinar within 4 working days. Yeah, other questions. So we have a lot of questions about AAC. Nabanita asks, what explanation for parents to understand AAC and overcome the myth part?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry. Yeah, what explanation can we use for parents to understand AAC and overcome the myth part? Where, yeah.
I would say let them do research. I would say talk to professionals a little bit more. See, the thing is, even if I say it at times, they'll say no. So I said, okay, read up. I will send you links, read it up. There's research that is saying this. It's not that I'm making it up. There is research up online. There are articles up online that have done studies where they have taken AAC, especially for children with autism too. They have done specific studies for kids with autism, where they have introduced AAC in the beginning for a group, introduced AAC after 3 months to a group, and not introduce AAC at all. And they saw a marked difference between the 3 groups. When for children where it was introduced from the beginning, there was a lot more language and speech development compared to the groups where it was delayed, right? So there is research. So I would say, please talk to your parents, get them to research it, send them some articles. Also, if you're interested, we are doing an AAC webinar, AAC symposium whole of next week. If parents are interested, ask them to join and understand why AAC, what's the importance of it, what can you do to help your child. Those are kind of things that you can do, but the first thing I would say is give them links to help them understand.
Got it. The second question is, are there any list of sounds on the basis of which ones emerge first and need to be worked on first?
Absolutely. As a child, from baby to first to second year, there is a developmental chart that happens because uh, movements develop a certain way. So you have your vowels that come first, which is your ah and your oo slowly, but slowly ah, oo, o, which comes in, and then you have your and your per and your b that comes in later, and slowly from there your were, your her, and then it goes up to the other sounds. Again, if you are curious about it, you just have to look for sound development chart, and you have multiples of those up online for parents to please read up, because if I start now, it takes some time to go through all the sounds. So I would suggest yes, but you have to understand, because sometimes I have parents coming and say, I want to work on t, I want to work on sir. I was like, I'm not going to work on those sounds because that's not the sounds that we want to work on first. And is I have to work on those bass sounds because the muscles are only ready to work on those sounds right now. As the muscles pick up more complex movement, you can work on the next few sounds. So you cannot just jump and say, no, I want to work on only that sound. He doesn't have sh, he doesn't have r. A lot of times I have parents coming and say, r, I want r, r. He can't do that. I'm like, one, most of the time it's not age appropriate as yet. The child will pick it up probably gradually. Two, he does not have the foundation skills to get to r. So if you're asking the child to say r, you are going to be torturing him for a while, I would say. So you got to be careful there.
Right. Thank you so much, Shereen. The third question I have is from Gagandeep Singh. He says, my kid sings and speaks in a singing manner. Should I stop him from doing that?
I'm sorry, his child does what?
Sings and speaks in a singing manner. Should I be stopping him from doing that?
I'm not sure what that exactly means. Sings and, oh, as in when he speaks also, he says in a, is it a musical tone, I'm guessing? Okay. I would say right now, let it be. And what you can do is model out what the actual tone we use is, right? Because if you're going to keep telling a child who's picking up on language because musical ability is better, you don't want to stop that development altogether.
Right.
You want to probably use it and see if you can get more, but at the same time model how you would use speech. You might not sing it all the time, but you might be able to say it this way. There's a little bit of rhythm, but it's not always musical. So the modeling can start from the parent side. Don't make it monotonous. Don't go, no, don't say this, don't, not that way either. Don't go to the other extreme, but to kind of just, help model so that he doesn't stop his development of language or picking up on new words.
The last question that we have, so there are a lot of parents and therapists, I think, who want suggestions on what music should they use while doing these activities. So is there any music you recommend?
So instrumental music is fantastic. Any kind of instrumental music is good. I've picked up a few from AMT when Joe and Lara had sent us music for the course, and I found it on some of the music on iTunes. So I send them links to that. There is also Eric Chappell, ERICCHAPELLE, Eric Chappell, who has some instrumental music, some of which I use. There's something called Brain Music on YouTube by him. I think someone's put up the entire album. So I actually took Miss Mary McFun there. It's again, like I said, slow paced, and there are a couple of slow paced music. And he's got a whole album of music which is for crossing midline activities and doing different kinds of activities. So you can look at it. It's there on YouTube. It's free. Just look for Eric Chappell and probably Brain Music. If you can look for it, you'll get an album with a robot picture. That's your cue. That's the right one.
So okay. A lot of parents who are asking very child-specific questions, and I'll request you all to. I'm attaching the links to Play Street, their social media, as well as their website. So please do get in touch with Shereen and her team for these questions, and I'm sure that you'll have your answers. I'm here for the next 10 minutes to answer any questions that the participants have, any general queries about IAC. Please leave them in the chat box. Because the audio was not clear today, I mean, it was fading in and out, we're going to make sure that we have subtitles embedded on this video. And if you want the recording of the session, then please leave your email ID not on this chat box, but while you fill out the Google form for us if you want an e-certificate. We have other upcoming webinars Monday onwards. I'm sharing the social media links now. Thank you so much for your time, Shereen, and it's always wonderful having you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, IAC, for this opportunity. It's a new topic for me too. It's just something that I've discovered over the past few months. So I'm really glad I got a platform to share that with all of you. I'm hoping you understood most of it, because I think, like you mentioned, a lot of the audio was not clear. Apologies for that, but I hope you were able to get at least some of the information.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Shereen.
All right. Take care, all of you. Stay safe.
Bye. I'm getting a lot of questions about the upcoming webinars. We have quite a few that are coming up. If you can just follow our social media handles, you'll be up to date. The best way to do that is if you follow the